be doing another audio talk. Haven't done one in a while, and who could be a better guest than Australia's best audio engineer? It's Shaun Fuller. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Connie. Thanks for having me. Very excited to
Absolutely.
finally get on here and have a chat with you.
Yes, me too. Man, I've known you for quite a long time. We toured together back in 2023, I think, and met a
Yeah,
bunch
yeah.
of times. And I love your work. I love what you're doing, and I'm really stoked to be doing this episode.
Oh, yeah,
But
likewise, likewise.
before we dive into anything audio, how did you start doing sound? What's your path?
Honestly, it's pretty I was kind of thinking about this. It's pretty convoluted for me. Like I think well, I'll try to condense it as much as possible, but I basically picked up the guitar in early high school and started playing it, and that was the first hard fork of my life. And I kind of decided, yep, no, I want to be a rock star. So played in bands and, started a band that kind of took a bit more seriously. And I think even when I was in year 12, there was this program you could do or like run by our government called it was called the Push Mentoring Program. And there was a like kind of electronic melodic-y hardcore band near for also from Melbourne called House was Hurricane. And so their guitarist Ryan McCleary was like really generous at the time to kind of like he'd meet up with me every few weeks and give me help with my band and that kind of stuff. And yeah, that was really nice. And I think that really like helped me kick my band or as like helped me like, really want to take music seriously. And then we had to do work experience in school. So you go like,
Mhm.
the first half of the year I did like 5 days with a builder, but the second half, I think it was my mum at the time met someone through her work who had just like a home studio that they had like near us. So I would go, that was my first like proper job was just like, you know, going on like Thursday nights and Saturday mornings recording, uh, with him. It was called Grapevine Studios, which was fun.
Mhm.
And then after that went on to, I kept doing my bands in the meantime, but also went on to, I thought, I should go study something because I thought, in my head, I thought that being a studio engineer was like this stable 9 to 5 job. And I thought that's a
Oh,
responsible thing to
very
do.
wrong.
Yes. Well, thankfully, my teachers, I feel like I enrolled in a course and almost the first or second week, they were like, this is not a job. You can't go to Sing Sing and give them your resume and say, or your diploma or whatever and say, can I have the job, please?
Studio work is for most people more of a hobby that needs to be supported by a different job.
Yeah, that's it. But, I was there anyway, so I was like, "Oh, might as well stick it out." And it ended up being really good because, like, it kinda led to my first, like, I guess, freelance work. There was a bunch of musicians who went there and ended up making an indie band called the Winter Suns, which was, like, the first EP I recorded, and I met someone there who had another local recording studio I started doing jobs out of called Debasement. And then from there, I was really fortunate. I was pretty relentless with, like, local recording studios and producers just trying to ask people, I'm like, hey, can I, come in, do some more experience? Can I come, work in your studio, whatever? And, most of the time didn't hear back, but after being, there was a studio called Ginger Studios in Cremorne, run by a producer named Jimmy Wyatt. And he ended up, letting me come in and, starting to give me some work there, which was awesome and also taught me a lot. And then the guy who produced my band's first EP is a producer named Malcolm Besley, and he, same thing. He kind of took me under his wing, and I started working on sessions, and ended up, working as his assistant for a couple years, and then all the time just doing bands. And then I think kind of the like outside of that, I'd like mix local venues and like the local emo night that we had and metal bands.
Mhm.
But and I was touring, playing with my own band. But the first band to like take me on tour as like a sound engineer was just a friend's band. But they were doing quite well. They were called Storm the Sky, and they were nice enough. Like initially, I was kind of just a like mate tech. I'd come along to shows and just hang out. And eventually, they were like, "Oh, you do studio stuff. You can mix live. It's the same thing, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing." And I discovered that the hard way, doing proper. But thankfully, the early tours I did, there were some really nice engineers who just shared their, willing to, kind of share their knowledge and help me. In particular, there was one guy named Brian Campbell, who was doing Beartooth, and We Came as Roamers at the time. And he was really nice it was a tour where we were the three support bands. Storm the Sky was the opener, and it was like we shared mics, lines, cabs, everything. So it was like we had identical things, but my band would come up and, it sounded okay. And then his band would come up and it sounded amazing. And he was really nice and just kind of suggesting things and showing me stuff, which was really, really helpful. And I think from there, it just kind of, uh, I think I just pivoted more and more into doing live sound, and then, ended up working with, it's hard to kind of tell exactly where it became the main thing, but ended up, yeah, from Storm the Sky, I met, some of the people I met bands, sorry, some of the people I met through playing in my band, there was another band called Ocean Grove I still work with at the moment,
Oh,
and
you
Boy
were in Ocean
Division.
Grove. I didn't know
No, no,
you were in
no,
that
I
band.
wasn't. No, I wasn't in that band. Sorry,
Oh,
no, no. So
sorry.
my band, I would have loved to be in that band, but no, like my band played with Ocean Grove a bunch, so I kind of were friends with them. And then after I started mixing Storm the Sky, they asked me to come mix them as well, which was they actually the first band to take me overseas, which was awesome. Like it was still to this day one of the best tours I've done. And then from there went on to work with Amity and Atreyu. I did some stuff with the Plot New and Centers Fail, and it kind of just, just kind of, I think just went from there. It's kind of hard
Mhm.
to remember the exact kind of part, like which band led to which band, but I think as you meet one band, they put you onto two more, and then those two
Right.
bands put you onto two more, So yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense, but that's probably like the
Yeah,
brief
no, totally.
summary
It
of it.
is it is kind of a either you come from studio and then
Yeah.
start doing small live gigs, or you just help out a local venue and you get some great people who teach you things. It's kind of the way it goes for most of us. And then you suddenly work with all of these amazing bands. And if you have a look at your website, which I think is pretty cool, and you can see a list of all these bands. And I was just browsing through it. I was like, damn, that's a pretty good resume. I saw my favorite
Oh,
band Tonight Live on there. I was like, hell yeah.
oh yeah, thank you.
I love
Yeah,
those
I did.
guys.
Yeah,
I
they're
love that.
fantastic. They're incredible. I didn't get to do
But
too much with them, but because I think I started with them around the time that just before they kind of had a bit of a hiatus.
yeah,
But yeah, it
but
was
they came
really
back.
fun. Yeah, they
They're
did,
back
which is
now,
awesome.
and
Yeah.
I saw them 3 times in 1 weekend, it's
Oh,
funny
that's
now, a
awesome.
couple of weeks ago.
That's so good.
Little
Yeah.
fangirl right here. But yeah, talking about the website,
Yep.
I think it's very professional. Having a look through it, I was like, "Damn, I want a website like that." And,
Oh,
do
thank
you
you.
do you think that it takes a website to run a business or being self-employed in this industry? Is it essential to have one, or do you think social media would be enough, or should we go back to old school business cards? What's your take on the whole, like, how do you sell yourself to bands?
Oh, look, it's a great. I honestly would say the website isn't necessary, but I also think it's a really good way to just to kind of show people a summary of what almost it's like for me it kind of replaces the resume. I think to a degree is because you can, if you say if you're chatting to a new client, they might ask, oh, what have you done, who have you worked with recently, and particularly if you've been doing it a long time, you can't list every band or every tour. And some bands you might only work with once, but you still want to mention them, but you also don't want to give false impressions. So
Mhm.
I think having the website's really helpful because you can essentially just either give someone a link to the whole thing, or if it's live work, you can give them the link to your live work, and they can kind of see the artists you work with. And if it's someone they think, for me, it's like if someone looks through my website and uh, it's a band, they go, oh, that's similar to us. They can have a look and see how much I've actually worked for them and that kind of stuff. So I think it's really helpful. I think social media is probably essential if you're established, not so much. But it also, I think, is another thing that
Mhm.
I think it's pretty standard that if you don't know someone, say if you said, oh, hey, Sean, I want to recommend this person for you. you do
Yes.
if they don't, you do just check their Instagram, you know what I mean? Even just to get
Yeah,
a
it's such a staple, such a standard thing these days, and
yeah.
I'm like, I have moments where I'm like, it's kinda cringe for me to post all these, like, audio videos and whatnot, and, like, a day in the life on tour, and sometimes I'm like, "Why the fuck am I doing this?" Like,
Oh,
I
I
don't even
reckon
wanna do it. But then there is times where, like, I get a message on Instagram, and honestly, most job requests I get these days are on Instagram,
yeah,
and,
right.
I get a message, and then, you start talking to, like, a management or a band, and you get, like you go on a call, and then,
Yep.
something that actually happened to me was someone was like, "Well," I was like, "How did you find me?" And that management was like, "Well, we Googled, um, 'good female audio engineer Europe,' and my
Oh,
Instagram
that's
popped up."
awesome.
Like,
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's
and that
awesome.
kinda proves to me that it is a good way to, like, put yourself out there and to make people see you in the industry. But yeah, I think a website is something that's like even more professional. And I have resumes with like listed all the tours that I did, all the bands that I did, but seeing your website, I'm
Yep.
like, I feel like that's a more professional and it catches the eye way more than just sending a page of like a PDF with a resume.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that, mate. A good friend of mine, Kian, you can look him up. It's got his website's called the AV Club or Noise Complaint, but he actually helped me put it all together, which was really nice of him because he plays guitar in my band as well. So I can't take credit for what it looks like. That was all him, but yeah, I like having it because it feels a bit easy. I think too because I my Instagram, it's halfway where it's not a fully personal page, but it's not a fully professional page either. So I think particularly for someone new who I don't know, I'd rather send them, my website because it's just
Mm,
just my work, that kind of thing. And then as you get to know someone, you know,
yeah.
Instagram still feels like a social thing as well. It's not a purely professional thing.
I struggle a little bit with that because I only have one page, and I have all
Yes.
my, like, audio professional stuff on there, but also I post about my vacations with my friends, and I post about my sports and things that have
Yep.
nothing to do with the professional audio thing, and then sometimes I'm like, "Maybe I should have an extra page for it." But now I also have the podcast page, the On the Roadcast
Yeah.
page, which is
Yeah.
kind of a yeah, so it's hard to navigate and find, like, the perfect way to do this, and then there is things like LinkedIn where people
Oh, yep.
usually find jobs or get approached by companies, and that just doesn't work for us at all. So yeah, you just have to find a way to get yourself out there.
Yeah.
Um,
100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't even
yeah,
have LinkedIn, so I'm like, I, I'm
yeah.
I hope it's not what people are using because if it is, I'm definitely missing some jobs. So just goes with the Instagram thing. Like I feel like I really like what you do because I think like the videos and stuff you share, they're good because they kind of demonstrate. I feel like they work on two levels, and like it shows the what you do and you're as a professional, but also I like watching them because they've often got like tips and things that if you're a newer engineer or somebody wanting to get into it, can really learn stuff from too, which I think is really good to do just to, kind of help people, figure
And
out if this is what they want to do and maybe how to level up as well a little bit.
this is really who I am. I know that nothing I say in my videos is gonna make a difference for you when you work, but there's definitely people with lesser experience that might take away something from that.
Oh, look, honestly, I reckon it's good for everyone because I think it's one of those weird jobs where because it's not a linear thing you learn, is it something that might seem so simple or baseline for one person has just never come up for somebody else. So I think sometimes even
True.
sharing those basic things is good because it might be something that maybe someone realizes, oh, I don't quite know how to do that, but they don't want to ask because because they're pride or whatever. So yeah, I reckon that's kind of
Yeah,
stuff's really
true.
cool.
There's
It's good.
so many moments that I have when I talk to other engineers and it's something so simple for them where I'm like, I never thought of that. But yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
another thing about the networking is we both find ourselves in like the heavy genres, I would say.
Yep.
And that in itself is like pretty close quarters, I would say. So if you start out working with
Yeah.
heavy bands, you probably will stick to heavy bands. But yeah, mixing heavy music is different to mixing I don't know, indie pop. So what to
Definitely. Yeah.
do is essential to having like a clear and snappy metalcore mix? Like what comes to mind first where you're like, this is something that's really important in our kind of music?
Well, look, it's hard 'cause I'm gonna contradict myself, but I think you've got to start by making sure your drums and your vocals, like drums are slamming and vocals are clear and legible, and just sound polished. But on the other end of that, I also think I think sometimes engineers, particularly in the heavy genre, get stuck on those things as well. Often they'll focus on getting those drums sounding so big and their vocals sounding, so clear that like guitar and bass and stuff is kind of left behind. So I tried over the years. I think I try to think of it way more from the audience's perspective, like kind of like what the guess the layman who maybe doesn't know audio as much, what they're going to be hearing, and then try, I guess, make sure that for them they're getting an enjoyable mix
Mhm,
that like kind of conveys exactly what the artists or the band intended in a musical way. Like, and I think often that means that you know if you listen to like your favorite records, yes, the vocals and drums will be loud here, but the guitars are still equal up here. And I think it's about making sure
mhm.
that all of your elements and stuff are still there, because that's what's going to make a mix sound, I guess, bigger or more enjoyable.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing I reckon too is not relying on volume. I think like I was guilty of this when I started, and I think it's really easy to do, particularly in like America and Australia, where the noise limits aren't as strict as that. Sometimes you can trick yourself into thinking, "Oh, this mix is awesome," whereas really it's just loud. Where I think
Mhm.
like a good test of a mix is if it still sounds exciting and full when it's quiet. I think that's like when the mix is. I feel like that's a really good example of a good
Mhm.
mix, which I
So
think
you're
one like.
saying if it sounds good in Switzerland, it's a good mix.
Yes, and that's pretty much exactly it. Like, I feel like there's a bunch of those European countries which will have such uh, low noise limits that, yeah, they really force you to be creative and to think about how to make things work without it all being loud. I think you particularly start thinking of like, uh, I've lost the kind of word, but like
Like gain
the
staging and
yeah, and also the ratio, because when you're quieter, it's often turning up your guitar is not just, it's turning down your other elements by comparison. You know what I mean? So I think
Mhm,
that's where you really have to start thinking about making sure everything's kind of hitting at those same spots.
mhm.
So yeah, I think that would, yeah, that'd probably be my, yeah, takeaway
Po
for good metalcore. And the other thing too, like I spent a fair bit of time doing pop music and, yeah, hip hop stuff as well. And one thing I found, particularly in the pop music, is their their tracks that they're using are often so well produced and so clean, which I think sometimes heavy bands maybe overlook a little bit. So I think whenever you can, if you've got a really good working relationship with the band, is making sure the tracks, like, I guess the source material as good as it can be, because
Oh,
if it's super
yes.
compressed on their end, you can't undo that, and even things, that, if you're at home in the studio, you get your guitar tracks or whatever your synth sounding amazing by themselves. But when it's all pushed together with the rest of your drums and your vocals and your guitar, it may not work that well. So I think having that kind of dialogue with, if the band has a musical director, or if it's just somebody in the band, is pretty important too, just to keep things musical. That kind of makes
Absolutely,
sense.
and then sometimes what I have experienced is just logistically, it's not possible to separate those tracks as much as I would like to, meaning
Yep.
I will get maybe, 2 stereo tracks or maybe 1 stereo track with everything
Yep.
on it, whereas the band has to trust you for this, of course, but, I always tell everyone, "I will go out of my way to learn your music before we go on tour,
Yep.
but then give me all the control that I can have because it will only benefit you if I have a separate sub job and a separate backing vocal and a separate everything that could go on those tracks. goes separately to me,
Yeah.
and then I can dial it in I see it fit in the moment, but that's not always the case. So sometimes it gets really tricky with the tracks.
Yeah, yeah, it's sometimes can that can be hard. I remember particularly when I was starting that the kind of the norm for tracks is no one had laptops or anything. You'd just have your, like, your iPod with the click panned all the way one side, and then the tracks all were panned the other, so the drummer would get the click, and then you just get this, like, mono and yeah, so it's
Mhm,
nice having stereo now, but it is so much better the more a band can separate out the stems. Because even too, it's like, if you're doing things by the book, you bring the same console, ideally, you're adjusting your graphic and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like different venues, things just hit differently. So, yeah, if you do have that option to be able to just push the fader up for the sub drop or, you know, push the keys up or whatever it is on your tracks, the more you can do definitely, or the more control you have definitely, translates to a better mix, I think.
mm. And I see you also, for some bands, you consider yourself the playback engineer, which is also something that in metalcore has become such an important position that is not something a lot of times that another person does on the side. Like I'm the monitor engineer, I'm also doing playbacks. A lot of times nowadays,
Yeah,
you need someone who's just there for playbacks. And I
yeah,
personally am always terrified of handling playback stuff because if that stops, everything stops.
yeah, yeah. Look, I've never had a gig where I've just been just playback, but I think because I've outside of mixing, I play in my own band, and when I can, I do session work for other bands. I kind of made a point at just to really learn Ableton, I guess, back to front, so I could
Mhm,
just to make sure there wasn't a black box section of the show that I couldn't see into, just to make myself confident that, if somebody had something go wrong with their MIDI or playback, and then, same for the other artists I was working for in my own band, is that I wanted it to sound good. So I just learnt how to program those things. And I think it is really helpful because it's a role where I think on massive productions, it means it's always best to have a dedicated playback person when you can. But the reality, particularly for a lot of artists, whether it's heavy music or pop music, is that it'll often have to be either the monitor engineer taking care of the playback, or the drummer
mhm,
taking care of the playback, or the guitar tech, someone like that.
mhm,
So yeah, I think
yeah.
I just enjoy it as well. It's kind of fun putting it all together and, knowing how it works, particularly how creative you can get with MIDI and things these days. Yeah, I like it.
I'm very intrigued, and I have made a point for myself that, I'm always like, "This year, I'm gonna learn this or that." Last year, or beginning of
Yep.
this year, I was like, "I'm gonna learn how to properly video edit." Next year,
Yeah,
probably,
nice.
I'm gonna learn how to, like, properly program in Ableton, and I think, again, like, it seems a little overwhelming to me sometimes just to watch these playback rigs of bigger artists, and I like, y
Yeah.
as you said, you wanna know every element of the show, so you should be able to
Yeah.
have have a look into this and understand what's going on, definitely. You were saying your own band, or your own bands. Are you always automatically the tech guy in the band? Even though you might only be there as a musician, do you always automatically kind of turn into the one who's taking care of all the tech stuff?
Yeah, I think so. You always do. I think, whether it's playing with my own band or session playing for other people, I think it's one of those. It's like no one necessarily expects you to do everything tech wise, but it's like if you know how to do it and you can make something better. I think we all push so hard to be in music that you just want to use those skills to do that and want to, you know, make. So yeah, I feel like it does. I do end up falling into that position, but it's definitely not from any pressure. It's because I like it, I like
Mhm,
being able to make the show better. So if there's something I've learned, I think it's also almost too is that we learn all these skills that we use to make other artists sound better, sound bigger, tighter, whatever. So it's kind of it's a real treat when you get to use those skills yourself for your own
mhm,
band. Particularly because the band I play for, it's me and two friends. It's called Commoner, and we're not a full-time touring band. We just play occasionally when we can because the other guys, one of them's a session drummer, and Nick is a session drummer and our guitarist Kian is a photographer and videographer. So it's nice to have almost a weekend warrior band, but still put out a really have
Great
all the bells
product.
and whistles. Yeah, have all the bells and
Mhm.
whistles that a bigger band does because
Yeah.
we don't have to pay someone to do it because we can do it ourselves. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
That's such a cool thing, and probably just, like, such high quality music in every aspect that other bands only wish they could have.
I think one thing I think has been so cool about technology recently is that it's gone from years ago. You could only have a playback rig if you had, a huge budget, or whereas now it's kind of, it's not cheap, but it's I think for a band who's playing regularly, it's become pretty affordable to have things like your own monitors rig or your own playback rig. So, and I think the technology's kind of evolved in a way that allows somebody like, 10 years ago, if you had a bass player who was also doing your playback and your monitors, that would be insane. Whereas now you can do that without stretching yourself
Mhm.
too much. Like obviously it doesn't work if it's a 6 or 7 piece band with snapshots for every song, but if it's just a set and forget in ears mix, like it's definitely doable
Yeah.
and worth learning for band members as well before if they're not yet at the point they can bring enough crew or all the crew they want to bring.
Just do it yourself because you have the technical means to you maybe need a little bit to, like, work out some like, a setup
Yeah.
that works, but you are capable of doing it on your own. I don't wanna say get rid of all the techs, but to a
No.
certain extent, it's nice to be able to do that on your own. One other
Yeah.
thing that I wanted to ask you, because I feel like a lot of people listening to this are not based in Australia as you are or haven't toured Australia
Yep.
yet. And in my experience, it's very, very different from touring Europe or the States or anywhere else. What do you think about it?
Definitely. I think Australia. I think in short, I think Australia can be pretty brutal to tour. In term, like I didn't think this at the time when I was starting, but the first tours I did, we would be in a 12-seater high ace van or or like a 8-seater Tarago or whatever, and you're still driving to each show. But unlike in America or Europe, where the cities can be 2, 3, 4 hours apart, Australia, the shortest like capital city to capital city is 8 hours. So you just end up driving overnight, and it's so much fun, but it can be a slog. And then eventually,
It wears you
even if
out.
when you get
Yeah.
to, yeah, and then when things get better, and the budgets allow you to start flying and staying in hotels and stuff, that is awesome, and it's a luxury, but it also can be quite brutal because again, if you're playing in Brisbane on Friday night, the gig might finish at 11. If you're really quick, you can be at the hotel by 12, but then you've got to fly the next day. So it means getting to the airport. If you're trying to load in Sydney at midday, you might have to be at the airport at 8 in the morning. So it's just can often be a long time of, late nights and early mornings. And don't get me wrong, it's still enjoyable, but I think comparing, and also because everything's flying, and unless you're doing a tour with a truck, you so often have to have all your equipment in separate Pelican cases all the time. Whereas when you go to America or Europe, there's just so much more infrastructure you can use. Like you can go on your bus, which is for me, I much prefer that. Even though I know some people like having the
Hotel
hotel where I
rooms.
like the bus. Yeah, just
Me
because
too.
the bus
Yeah.
is just it's you can wake up. Instead of having to get up hours and hours before load in, you can wake up, 90 minutes before and explore the city, and get a coffee, and then have load in. And then if you want to have a nap in the
Mhm.
afternoon, you can go back to your bunk and,
Yeah. I'm
stuff like
totally
that.
on
And
your
then in
side.
terms, yeah. And then the travel is mostly done when you're asleep. So you don't
Yeah.
have to be awake or aware for all that travel time. And then in terms of your equipment, because you don't need to worry about flying it all the time, you can put it in bigger racks. You can build it in ways I feel like that are much more permanent. So rather than like, I almost think of it like, building Lego each day and then having to tear it apart. You can kind of have it all half done and then
Yeah.
put it back together in a new venue, which is really nice.
Mm. But I want to
And I
say
think,
one thing about touring Australia, even though it might be a little more time that you spend either in a van or in a bus,
Yep.
or you have to get up early for all the flights. It is a very special experience, and the country is beautiful, and it's warm all year round, basically. So there is a lot of
Yeah.
like advantages to it, and I'm very happy that I got to experience that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad. Look, me too. Like when I look back on all the, it's like the conditions I started in. If I look back now and go, oh man, that was pretty brutal. But it also never felt that way at the time. I think because it was so exciting and so
Totally.
new. And if you're touring with people, again, at the end of the day, everybody's there because they chose to be there. It's not a job you do because you have to do it. So I think that kind of makes it a
Mhm.
lot of fun as well.
I was talking to a friend about this just yesterday. I used to do weekenders for small local bands. We would get in a van and do like an 8-hour drive, sleep somewhere for a couple of hours, drive some more hours, do one show, maybe two, and then drive all the way back. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I didn't
Yeah.
second guess what I did to my back at that time or whatever.
Yeah.
Now I need a little bit more comfort, but starting out in those conditions just makes everything that comes after it even better.
Yeah, 100%. And I reckon the big one too for all Aussie bands going overseas. And America is good, but particularly Europe is catering. We just don't have, except for when you're doing, unless you're doing like the arenas or stadiums, venues generally don't do catering here. Like when you do a regional tour, you might get like a pub feed at like the regional shows, but it's not like Europe where it feels like in Europe every venue has someone who's a kitchen that's dedicated to like cooking for the touring staff, which is for us
Mhm.
is amazing. Like
Like a
it never
full
gets old.
healthy
It's so
meal.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's like instead of,
Yeah.
like I find often in America you're so often having to eat
Mhm.
out, which is yum, but it can get, a bit much sometimes. So it's nice when you're in Europe and you get,
Right.
it feels like a home cooked meal from somebody every day, which is so sick. Or two
Totally.
home cooked meals,
Gotcha.
yeah.
I'm about to hit the road tomorrow and enjoy some of those home cooked
Oh,
meals.
amazing.
One last thing before
Yep.
we have to um, wrap it up. What
Yep.
is the craziest thing that has ever happened to you on a tour? Could be positive, could be negative. Like the first story that comes to mind in your past 12 years of touring. I'm sure there's some.
Craziest thing. Well, that is tough. That is really tough. I'm trying to think of a story I can share.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Take
I
your
could put it
take
down
your
to a
time.
singular. I don't know if I could put it down to a singular crazy thing. I feel like I've been really fortunate to experience a lot of really fun things. Like going, I've been snowboarding in America as part of my work, and I've been snowboarding in Austria while I was at work, which was really fun.
Mm.
And I guess one thing, but there was one time, one pretty crazy thing we did was way I had a one tour where we had an American tour that ended, and then we had about 8 or 9 days before we had to start a Europe tour. And so the option kind of was we could all fly back to Australia, but, by the time you do that, that takes 2 days, then you gotta recover for 2 days, and then we would have to leave 2 days later. So me and our tour manager, Sam, end up going to Egypt in the middle of a tour for a week, which was so fun. Like, it was such an adventure, definitely not a holiday. Like, it was we really just try to pack in as much as we could, but yeah, that was pretty crazy. And it was
Oh,
fun
that
even
sounds
though it wasn't.
amazing.
Yeah, and even though it wasn't strictly part of the tour, getting to do that, uh, through work was, I don't know, I felt super fortunate for that, and I think that there's
Awesome.
been lots of experiences like that,
Mhm.
like, going to places like Japan and Greece and yeah.
Just seeing the
One time
world
on
through
tour, we got
work.
to
Yeah.
yeah, one thing that just came to mind then years ago to Australia has a, wildlife park connected to a theme park that and they run a white tiger, like, conservation place, and so we end up being able to it's called Dream World, and then I can't remember what the tiger park's called, but basically we got to go in the morning and go and, like, walk around while the trainers walked the tiger cubs around, which was, it
Mm,
was really fun. So kind of meeting them and,
yeah,
you get to see a bit about what they do, like for conservation and that kind of thing. And then you spend the day at the theme park afterwards. So yeah, that was good too. That was a lot of fun.
beautiful. Yeah. Hey, that makes people probably want to tour when they hear all of these amazing
Yeah.
experiences.
Look,
It's not all that,
it,
but
no, it's not all that,
sometimes.
but, and I think too, I think you can definitely make it that as much as there's definitely a lot of hard work that
Mhm,
comes with touring, and there's a lot of, miss a lot of sleep and you're away from friends and family and that kind of thing. But I think as long as you're with people who kind of all remember that, and or even remembering yourself that you kind of chose to be there and you chose to be doing what you're doing, you can kind of there's always something fun to do and
mhm.
something exciting to be able to do if you look for it and kind of make it happen, I guess.
That is such a beautiful way to end this episode. I love
Cool.
it.
All right. Good. Good.
That's the best. That's the perfect end statement because I think we've already hit our 30 minutes, but there's so much to talk
Okay.
about always. But I think I went through my main questions, and thank you so much for doing this. I've really been looking forward to
Ah,
this for a while now,
my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was really cool to have a chat.
and I really hope we'll cross paths again soon in
Yes,
some
I'm sure.
venue
I'm sure we will.
festival situation. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
last time I
and
saw you was in Melbourne when I was on tour there, which was
yeah,
also really cool.
yeah. Well,
Thank
good
you
luck
so
with
much,
your tour
Sean.
tomorrow as well.
Thank you. Oh, it's gonna be a good one. Euro summer, here we go.
Yeah, nice,
Sweet. Thank you. Bye bye.
beautiful. All right, see you later. Bye.